Good afternoon. I'm Timothy Myers. I am the Sarah and Ernest Butler Principal Conductor and Artistic Advisor at Austin Opera, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Live from Midi Terrace. Before we get into today's episode, I want to express our gratitude to our lead community and education sponsor, HEB, and our special sponsors for this episode, our wonderful friends, Jim and Joe Green. Today is the third episode in a series in which we're exploring the essential and unforgettable aspect of opera, which is the orchestra. Being a conductor, I'm very aware that at the end of the performance, I'm the only musician in the pit or on the stage that hasn't made a sound. And so I want to make sure that we highlight the people who actually do. In these episodes, we're meeting some of the fabulous members of the wonderful Austin Opera Orchestra, and we're hearing about them as musicians, gaining more insight into their instrument and the key role that the orchestra plays in the drama and storytelling of an opera performance. In our first two episodes, we had great chats with our principal oboe, Ian Davidson, and our principal trumpet, Bob Cannon. If you missed those, I encourage you to visit our YouTube or Facebook page and check those out because they were really, really terrific conversations. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to remind you that we are live today, which means at the end, you will have an opportunity to ask questions of our guest. If you would like to do that, you can post your question in the comments on either the Facebook or YouTube feed of this broadcast, and we will do those at the end. Don't be shy. Whatever comes to mind, we want you to be able to ask the question, so put it in the chat box. Today, I'm really, really excited to welcome an astonishingly dynamic and versatile artist who has performed classical, tango, and popular music in over 30 countries around the world in venues ranging from concert halls and universities to clubs. She appears on dozens of internationally released CDs, film scores, and broadcasts, including the Dixie Chicks Grammy-winning Home, Richard Linklater's art house hit film Waking Life, and 8 appearances on PBS staple Austin City Limits. From 2001 to 2005, she toured globally with rock legend David Byrne of Talking Heads, appearing with him on broadcasts such as Late Night with Conan O'Brien and The Late Show with David Letterman, as well as 2 international DVD releases and an album on None Such Records. She has recorded for labels such as Harmonia Mundi, Naxos, and Sony, among others. While earning the Doctor of Musical Arts degree from the University of Texas, this artist put down roots in Austin, where she is currently violist of the classical crossover quartet, Tosca String Quartet, principal violist of the Austin Opera Orchestra, a member of the Austin Symphony, and associate professor of viola at Texas State University. Please welcome Dr. Ames Asbell. Hi, Ames.
Hi, Tim.
I'm so happy to see you.
I'm thrilled to see you today.
Yeah, welcome. This is great. I'm excited about the chat we're going to have. You and I did a little kind of pre-chat just to talk through a few things, and we've got a lot of great music to share with the audience today and a lot of fun things to talk about. Just jumping in, I'd love to hear about your background with the viola and, from picking it up, kind of, what happened from there, your passion for the instrument, and just kind of take us through that a little bit.
Well, thanks, Tim. Well, viola, I kind of feel like viola is a little bit the unsung hero of the string section. It's not the first instrument that comes to mind when you think of a string instrument. And I had an older brother. The way I got started with viola is I had an older brother who played the violin, and he started in a Suzuki program, but we moved around a little bit, and so I didn't get to start young like he did. I probably would have started on the violin. But I started in the public school system in Georgia. The string program started in 4th grade, and I think that the orchestra director she knew my brother and saw me coming probably, and she thought, oh, this one is ripe for the plucking. And she saw, she took a look at my hand. I don't know what happened. I don't know if she needed violas. I don't know if she really thought my hand was the right fit for the viola, or I don't know if she saw that I was kind of a shy kid and maybe not the violin personality, but she suggested that I try the viola. And I was like, well, sure. I kind of was relieved to not be playing what my older brother was playing. And so I just kind of happened to play the viola. I don't really even know the reason, but I'm super grateful because I think it's an incredible instrument and it fits my personality really well. I would not have survived in sort of the the cutthroat competitive violin world, I don't think. And
Yeah.
I thank her for my for my love for music and my career every day, that orchestra teacher.
Yeah, it's amazing how those influences in our life can really set something in motion that can in our cases, especially for a music teacher, can become a lifelong thing for us.
Absolutely.
So tell me about you and opera. What does that story look like? What do you remember the first opera you heard, or sort of your introduction, a first aria? And then I'm also going to ask if you remember the first opera you ever played.
Yeah, interesting. I thought about this question. Spoiler alert, I had this question ahead of time, folks. And I had to think about it because I thought, what was the first opera I ever heard? And, my parents weren't big classical music fans, but they did have a few records. And I remember, Tchaikovsky, Piano Concerto #1 with Van Cliburn, that was the classic one. And we did have an album of Carmen. So I'm probably guessing it was Carmen. And it's funny because I've always loved that opera. And I do remember the first one I played was Mozart Così. And
amazing.
Yeah, that was really fun. I had in college. And I remember actually the first opera I played with Austin, which was then Austin Lyric Opera. But Austin Opera was Marriage of Figaro in the fall of 1996. So.
Oh, and we'll come full circle for you this autumn. Yes, when we do Marriage of Figaro again. That's really exciting. Also, yeah, we'll have some good Carmen excerpts on our upcoming All-Star concert that people can look forward to also.
Oh yeah.
So you have, I really love the diversity in your background and in your current career, that you're involved in all of these things. And I think that's really something that is enriching as a musician. And I believe that good music is good music. And so all of these things feed each other. Right. Can you give us an idea what the difference is of playing in an opera orchestra versus a symphonic orchestra, especially? Because I think many people equate these as the same. And in fact, they're very different beasts. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
They're very, very different skills, and they require a very different set of awareness and intention from a musician. They're very, very, very different. With symphony, we rehearse, and it's not that there's not flexibility in the music. It's not that there's not spontaneity in the performance, but we rehearse, and then generally the concert will go something like the rehearsal went. And it's not that it's very different in opera, but I feel like there's just so much more room for spontaneity. And as the feeling moves, there's obviously written into the music, there's much more flexibility in terms of timing. But I just feel like there's such an element of in the moment that we have in opera that's thrilling. Also, the writing, I think, is really different, especially for viola. And obviously, it depends on the composer, but I feel that, in the symphony, we really are in between the violin section and the cello section. And you're going to hear that in a lot of the excerpts that we play. That's true in opera, too. But I feel like in opera, and especially with some of the great composers we have that specialize in opera, the viola has a much more distinctive voice and is used in much more creative and broad ways. It's just, I feel like there's a special color that the viola has in its voice that opera composers seem to exploit to, generally speaking, better effect than symphonic composers. And hear that a lot more, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I really like how you place that. And this leads us into some of the musical excerpts that we want to talk about. And talking about, we get to hear a lot of Puccini today, which is amazing because Puccini was such a terrific orchestrator. And when you really dig into the scores, there's such emotional content to the way he orchestrates and the way he creates color and atmosphere. I just got goosebumps on my arms thinking about how brilliant he was at that, and really, in the best possible way, exploiting the orchestra and its possibilities, its capabilities. I mean, he really does drive the orchestra like a Ferrari. And I love that. So I love that we get to hear a lot of Puccini today, and then some other things towards the end. You brought a friend with you today.
I did. I brought a friend.
Okay. Does this friend have a name?
It doesn't. A lot of people know instruments, but I don't know. It's not my bag really. But I'll tell you a little bit about my viola, and then I wanted to just say a few things, if it's okay, about the difference between violin, viola, and cello, and all the construction, because you're going to hear it in our first excerpt that we play. So this is my viola. It's almost 100. It was made in 1922 in Verona, Italy, by a guy named Jago Petronella. And the viola has a really different kind of voice than the violin or the cello. It's really interesting, and I feel kind of really proud of the fact that the viola was actually the first of the string family instruments to evolve back in the mid 1500s.
Right.
And the viola is the word. Violin means little viola. And because as it emerged, luthiers kind of hit upon these exact formulas, acoustical proportions, that the range of what ended up being the violin and the size just matched perfectly. It was manageable, easy to play. And those acoustical proportions made the violin sound kind of leap out of the instrument. It's a brilliant sound that works really well. So the violin kind of came to the fore, and the viola was really interesting. The viola, we started with two different sizes. We had a big viola and a little violas that were smaller than mine, big violas that were bigger and really not possible to play our current repertoire on. But because its acoustical proportions aren't quite correct, it has a much darker, more soulful kind of sound. It doesn't project as well. So you'll notice in the clips we hear, it may not be as loud as the violins or as the cellos, but both of those instruments have those sort of perfect proportions. My viola is 16 inches long in the body, and for it to have the right proportions, it would have to be 20 inches long, which would make it really hard to play. So other than that, the instruments have evolved side by side, but the viola got a little bit left in the dust because it didn't project as well. And so it's now just in the 20th century kind of coming to the fore as more of a solo instrument.
Yeah. And what's interesting, because we've had Ian, with oboe, and Bob with the trumpet, there's another element to string playing that is important for people to know more about, and that is the bow, right? So there are actually two things happening there. And so the possibilities of what you can do between that, and in rehearsals, we talk a lot about, things that happen with the left hand or the right hand, or a combination of both, to really get the maximum amount of impact for what we're looking for in this particular passage. So can you just give us a short little primer on the bow, how that works, the interaction between that and the instrument? Absolutely.
So this is my bow. It's not, it's from around the same time as my viola, but English, from the Hill shop, which was a great shop. The thing that's interesting about our bows is they started out kind of shaped like convex, and that didn't provide a really strong sound. So if the bow makers wanted to make a stronger sound, so they figured out this reverse kind of camber, which allows the bow to kind of bounce and spring in all kinds of different parts of the bow. So we get lots of different opportunities for effect. We can kind of ricochet type things, or we can play short notes that are off the string, or long notes that are on the string. And we manipulate these sounds in a lot of different ways. We can play this. This is called the bridge, and this is called the fingerboard. So we can play close to the bridge, and we're playing. Is this mic sounding okay? Yeah. Okay. We can play really loudly, or if we want to play softer, we play over here. This is a really kind of a hard, stiff part of the string, and as we go over here, we get softer. And we can play, the tip is softer. We can play with all of the hair on the string. This is actual horsehair. We can play with all the hair, or we can play with just a little hair. Our conductors love to yell one hair at us. One hair.
I think it's funny, because I feel like as a conductor, I'm saying like more hair on the string, more hair on the string. Like, right?
So we really use the weight of our arm. So we can put all the weight in, or I can kind of suspend my weight a little bit and put very little weight into the string. For all these parameters that we're using, And then on the left side, we have, in addition, we use the left hand to make the notes, and we can go all over the place, but we have this great thing that we can do called vibrato. And that really adds a ton of character to the note. So we vibrate, we can vibrate narrow or wide. We can use different types of vibrato. So that's something that we really learn to manipulate as an artistic tool. Hopefully that's enough of an explanation. But when you're listening, it's cool to imagine like what all is going on there to make that sound, because there's a lot.
Exactly. And that's right. And this is why we spend time in rehearsal talking about what's the appropriate color and how do we want to achieve it. And you know, and even the acoustical properties of making one of these colors, how does it work in balance, right? Sometimes if we're looking to make sure that we're playing under a singer, you know, the strings will play more towards the fingerboard. So there's just a little more transparency in the sound. So it's a really fascinating thing. And I think you set us up really beautifully to go into hearing some music. So the first excerpts, we have two excerpts from Puccini's Madame Butterfly. Again, I mean, so many incredible musical moments. Puccini, wonderful orchestrator, also wrote in a very compact fashion. His operas are very difficult to perform because there's really not a wasted note in any of them. And so moving, you know, through the opera is very difficult. And like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of flexibility that's inherent in this repertoire. The way that he shapes a line, or structures a melody or some sort of harmonic movement. It's a very specific style to Puccini and his fellow composers around that time. So we're going to hear a clip. This is the very opening of Madame Butterfly, actually. And I'd be interested to know why you selected this for us to hear.
Well, in one of my goals for everyone today, I have a goal for each one of you listening, and that's for you to recognize the sound of the viola so that when you go to the opera or when you watch recordings, you can be like, oh, that's that sound. So what the opening does, it's a fugue, which means it's some material that is repeated and manipulated and passed around between voices. So you're going to hear it first in the violins. So notice how bright the violins sound when they play, and then after 8 measures or so, we'll pass it off to the violas, and you will immediately hear the volume will drop a little bit, but the main thing you hear is the sound gets very much darker. We're playing the same thing they're playing a little lower, but it's a real change in color. So I thought it was a nice juxtaposition of that. And then the cellos come in and they play the fugue theme. So you'll hear it when it gets down even lower, but what you might not realize is that the violas are still playing along with the cellos in that whole section. And so one thing that we'll talk about during the episode today is how the viola adds color to other instruments. So we're kind of one ingredient of the sound right there. Another moment in this clip to call to mind is after you hear all those fugue entrances, the violins have this little scurrying figure that you'll hear, and they go all the way down, and then all of a sudden the violas go to pick up that line right at the bottom. And I thought that's so interesting because those are notes that the violins can make on their instruments. They're the two lowest notes on the instrument, but why Puccini put them in the viola? So interesting. So you can kind of hear a little color there. And then we have all these little, at the end of the clip, da-da-da-da-da figures. So those are in the viola. So
love it. Okay, we're going to hear the vigorous opening to Puccini's Madame Butterfly right now. I love how in that clip we hear, even when we get into the first part of the scene, uh, that we hear still the interjection of that theme, "Ba-da-dee-da-dum, ba-da-dee-da," that keeps coming back to remind us. And there's a lot of speculation about why Puccini wrote this the way he did and why he wrote that introduction. Of course, people try and figure it out, and a lot of people say that this has something to do with like the busyness of American life, like kind of what Puccini would have imagined New York City or something to be like. So I love how he just blends those worlds as you come into that scene. Tell us about this second clip from Butterfly.
Up on one more thing from that first clip,
please.
I didn't think to tell you what happens when we play without the bow, and you heard.
Oh yeah, good. You hear it. Yeah.
That's called pizzicato, and whenever you hear that sound, that's just us. We can usually do it with our bow in our hand, but that's what that is.
Great. And yeah, again, a completely additional color, and the way you play pizzicato, there's a ton of variety. So as we can see, there's a wealth of possibility in the string family. Tell us about, we've got another clip from Butterfly. This is from much later in the opera. So tell us about this and why you chose it.
Well, I chose it because we were talking about about ingredients of sound. So the setup here is that this is after Sharpless leaves Butterfly, and he's been trying to convince her to let them have the child, and to let Pinkerton have the child. And then there's a cannon shot in the harbor, and they go and see who it is, and they see that Pinkerton's name is on the vessel. So there's this this duo with violin and viola, and this melody that we hear throughout Butterflies comes back. And when you hear those sounds really blended together, the thing I was hoping people could listen for and hear is that the viola is adding a little darkness, a little seriousness, a little mournfulness to the violin sound there.
Yeah, which is really forecasting dramatically what's going to happen, right? That's what's interesting, is that tune is the big tune from her famous aria Un Bel Dì that she sings at the beginning of Act 2, about looking for the day when Pinkerton's going to return and they're going to be happy together and all of this. And so this is a great moment because we hear that come back, but like you're saying, with this sort of darker tone to it, that maybe not everything is going to quite work. I mean, shocker, opera, I know.
Exactly.
But Puccini does this very subtly, and he really highlights what's coming, and psychologically starts to paint it for the listener in an interesting way. This is another clip from Madame Butterfly. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, and that's a great clip to demonstrate Puccini's ability to really flex the dynamic muscles of an orchestra, right? And that he really distills the orchestration down when he brings that theme back. So it's delicate. It's definitely her with this darker color, and then it just blooms into what this tutti section that we just heard the beginning of there. That's really everybody going after it and making this huge, luscious sound. Also in there, there's the introduction of something that we haven't talked about yet, and that is tremolo.
Right. And we'll get lots of tremolo
coming your way.
What's interesting is, we do tremolo is when it literally means like to tremble. And so it's when we take the bow, and it really can create a big sense of drama and suspense, foreboding, depending on how you do it. But there was something interesting toward the end of that clip, which was one of the things when I was choosing it, I actually kind of extended a little to make sure we got into this finger tremolo, which is another thing that we can do, which is a different effect, maybe a little different than the separate tremolo.
Yes, separate tremolo we've got coming up in one of these excerpts coming up. So now we move to La Boheme.
Yes.
And you've got a couple great excerpts chosen here, one from Act 1 and one from Act 4, both involving the singer or the character who expires at the end. Spoiler alert. So tell us, this first one is in Act 1. Mm-hmm. Tell us why you chose this.
Well, because it's a viola solo.
Yeah, of course.
We don't get a lot of solo moments, but generally they're saved for the most sort of emotional. Someone's falling in love, someone's dying, something big is happening. And we have this little short solo. It's right after Mimi and Rodolfo are met. She's come in, she needs a light for her candle, and there's chatting, and then there's poetry on his bed, and she sees it. They're talking and getting closer. You can kind of see it happening, and then she goes over and she picks up. She's like, "Oh, poetry!" And then they fall in love. And that moment, that there's this lovely little short viola solo. And
amazing.
It really mimics her voice. It's right along the range of her voice and kind of blending into her voice. So that's a really cool thing too. Sorry.
It's a really amazing moment, and like you say about blending and how really the voice and the violas become synonymous at one point, right? Really speaking together is really a special moment. Great, let's hear this clip. Don't we all wish our first dates went like that? You get to know each other and tell about yourself with this beautiful orchestra underpinning. It's awesome.
That brings back special memories for me because that was another one of the operas in my first season playing. playing
What
with
a masterpiece that is.
right. How lucky was I? Figaro and
Yeah.
Bowen in the first season. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's right. That's right. Two definite masterpieces. So now we see this is a really interesting clip. This is Act 4 of Bohème. Mimi is there in the apartment. She's very, very sick, and the whole color of not just the scene, the visuals, the lighting, everything has changed. But here we hear the whole color of the orchestra take a turn, right? And really do a lot of text painting. I mean, there's a moment in here that's where Puccini specifically orchestrates and gives a chord that's undoubtedly the moment that she passes into the next life. But tell us something about this clip that you want us to hear.
Well, I love the way that all of the instruments are blended. I mean, I just feel like and the way that the colors shift through this excerpt, I thought was really special.
Excellent. Let's hear it. This is from La Bohème, Act 4.
Mi ha detto il medico, Stella.
Madonna benedetta, fate la grazia, questa poveretta che non debba morire. Se ci vuole un riparo, perché la fiamma smetterà. Così, e che possa morire, ma non lo so.
Io spero ancora, mi pare che sia grave.
Non credo.
L'ho respirato. Cos'è grave? A voi.
Oh,
That color at the end.
it's amazing, isn't it? I love it, and how he exploits the range of different instruments, right? And you hear the cellos and the basses play that pizzicato, that sort of daunting pizzicato line. Exactly. That's right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's incredible.
Celestial sound at the end. It's just
That's right. That's exactly the way to say it. It's absolutely celestial. So we're moving to another Puccini opera, and this is awesome because this is one we have coming up at the end of our season in Austin. So this is a good little preview. All three of these clips are from Act 2. Mm-hmm. Really, the confrontation between Tosca and Scarpia, and some key moments that happen dramatically. I think I can't remember off the top of my head how long that act is, but it's, in my opinion, one of the best acts in opera. Mm-hmm. Just the way it's written for the characters and for the orchestra, the way it all comes together. So set this up for us a little bit of some things that we're listening to as the orchestra's upping the ante, one might say.
Well, this act, actually, in terms of the viola repertoire, this act is kind of famous because it's one of the best viola parts in terms of the viola having a role in really driving the drama. And this really is an exciting thing. And I've talked to some friends in preparing for this, and everybody was like, Tosca Act 2. Oh my gosh. So let's see. The first clip is, there's an extended kind of negotiation at the beginning, in the first part of this act, between Tosca and Scarpia. And Scarpia is wanting to prosecute her lover, and he's trying to, he just wants to get with Tosca, right? So he's going to hang over her head. And so this first scene that we're going to hear is the kind of the beginning of these negotiations, and he's saying about to order torture for her lovers, and she has to witness all of this. It's really a kind of harrowing act in that way. And So we're going to hear the beginning, the viola kind of coming in and out of the string section. There's this beautiful string colors that happen, and listen for the violas. I think we're entering on, you'll hear, I believe the cellos begin this one, and then we start, you hear us enter on this low E flat. They're the first notes you hear, they're the first three notes on, the lowest, three notes on the viola, and the color is just luscious. So
amazing. Let's watch and listen right now. Wow, what a setup, right? you know something is coming there, the way that, especially that suspension, right, that we hear that then resolves up and then inspires that oboe line that picks it up later. Amazing. What's this next one all about? This is just, I mean, maybe a minute and a half later in the scene.
Right. So this is you hear a ton of tremolo in here. This is the drama really increasing. You'll hear, and some of these are in open fifths or perfect fifths. That's the tuning of our instrument, and I mean, it's such a menacing figure. And then we also in the violas have this little figure that's I don't know, that's Scarpia menacing.
Yes, for sure. He's turning up the heat here, right? I mean, he's more and more threatening, and we hear the orchestra representing that and really building the tension. I can't even imagine doing this without an orchestra, right? Because you would really, the scene would never have the same kind of tension that it has.
The orchestra is definitely a player. I mean,
absolutely,
an equal character, I think.
Completely agreed. Let's check out this second clip.
Che dice il cavalier? Nega. Insistiamo. Vedremo, signora.
Dunque per compiacervi si dovrebbe mentir.
No, ma il vero dovrebbe abbreviare. Sai
That's amazing. A lot of tremolo, and then we hear punctuation, like in the low strings, bum, 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 and all of these amazing things. I love how just harmonically he just keeps turning the screw, one might say, in this scene, right? The pacing of it is really incredible. This third clip that we have from Tosca is also very interesting because a big moment, and this is also one where it's really important to watch closely what happens on stage while you're listening and see how they relate to each other, because Tosca makes a big decision in this clip.
She really does. And
Yes.
it's not one she wants to make. And yeah. And so there's so much nuance in this moment. And that, again, Puccini turns to the viola. So in this moment where she's faced with this decision of what do? You'll hear Scarpia say, "Ebbene," like, well, so what's it going to be?
Yeah, exactly.
And you hear her kind of go, this motive, that figure, which, I don't know, I've read in some places it's a motive that comes back that has to do with the Madonna. So it may be her praying to the Madonna for help. It may be her just mourning that she's in this situation, that's the pain of the moment, but it's really a poignant moment. And it's interesting, she never says yes.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
she goes, all right, if it must be, it must be. But this is, dramatic moment. So great.
Excellent. Yeah, that's an interesting point you make about that melodic bit, because that's not typical for Puccini unless he's really wanting to say something. And even the way the intervals in that line relate to each other is very interesting.
The wrong notes. Those are the pitches that you should be listening for, but you can't miss it. It's the only thing happening. So it's center stage right there on Tosca and on the viola. So I'm loving it.
Great. So listen and watch carefully in this clip.
Yes.
Dio m'assisti.
Aspetta. Odi,
Ma libero all'istante lo voglio.
occorre simular, non posso far grazia aperta. Bisogna che tutti abbian per morto il cavalier. Quest'uomo fido provvederà.
Sì, ma sicuro.
L'ordin ch'io gli darò voi qui presente. Spoletta, chiudi! Ora rito, il prigionier sia fortivato. Attenti, ove faccemmo nel conte Malieri.
Wow.
Wow. And more than
And I hope everyone noticed what she picked up off the desk at the beginning of that clip when he wasn't watching.
And one last little teaser. If you come and see Tosca, when the moment happens and she says, "Oh, he's dead," here's what you're going to hear. The only thing happening. So if you come, listen for the violas. Hold the D. One
right.
haunting note.
That's right. Again, really showing Puccini using the full range of the orchestra in so many ways. Those are some great clips, and it was really fun to have a chance to focus on a composer and really learn more also about Puccini kind of through that and how it relates to your instrument. And we do have a couple questions that have come into the chat that I want to ask you. So the first one is, you've played many different types of music with different types of singers. How does your vibrato change, and do you try to match that of the singer?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yes, absolutely. I mean, vibrato is an interesting thing because it's kind of an emotional response to the music. And when we're playing solo, we've trained and studied for so many years and worked on being able to express what we're trying to through vibrato, that it often happens automatically. But when we're playing with other musicians, whether they're instrumentalists or singers, that's something that can really unify the character of what we're doing if we're vibrating in the same way. And so, singers have vibrato just like we do. So that's something definitely that we tune into. And that's something that's a little bit different in every style of music that we play. And so we spend a lot of time in our training learning how to control that so that it does become automatic over the course of our development as artists.
It's a wonderful expressive device in so many ways. We have another question. This is actually, I love this. It's can you play the viola backwards, meaning with the bow in the left hand?
That's a funny thing. I suppose you could, but it doesn't really work for orchestra, because if you did that, we're sitting in the pit and one person was backwards, then we wouldn't fit in the space and all kinds of things would be happening. So I think that the conventions of the instrument are such that they've developed, over time. And I'm so sorry if you're all hearing that dinging.
Okay.
I tried to turn my notifications off. I could clearly didn't know how to do it. But that's interesting because there are some people who had disabilities and had maybe missing a digit or missing a limb, and there have been adaptations made on these instruments. It just makes it a little different in orchestra.
Yeah, that's amazing. What an interesting question. I'm glad that came up. Well, Ames, I want to thank you for joining us today on Live from MIDI Terrace. It's been a real treat to talk to you and to share your passion for the instrument and for opera and how those things just go hand in hand together. So thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to the rest of our season with our All-Star concert that we'll be filming, and then performances of Tosca. And so we want to remind everybody of that. And on our way out, I also want to again thank our lead sponsor, HEB, and our sponsor for these episodes, Jim and Joe Green. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to share this with other people who weren't here today, that's great. Please do that. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.